Fiends. Welcome once again to another edition of the Ministry of Horror. I'm your host, Tez, and we're back once again with another slice of ghoul-tastic terror. We're going to talk about some news, and then we're going to talk about some reviews. And that's kind of it for this evening's show. Feeling a little bit under the weather, so I'm going to keep this fairly brief. There's not really too much to report on since the last show. I think, we've kind of gone from the highs of October where there's a new horror film or a horror film every single day to, we're approaching not so spooky season. We're approaching the holiday season, Christmas season. And there's just less horror on at the moment that I am seeing. But still managed to watch a couple of horror films. We have a return of retro reviews. So this week's retro review is going to be Creepshow 2. We're going to watch Creepshow 2. Well, we're not going to watch it. We're going to talk about it because I've already watched it. And then for our modern review, I watched a film on Shudder this week called Wake. 2024 release, I believe. So we're going to talk about that a bit later on, and then we're going to go through the news before then. But yeah, in terms of the preamble, there isn't really too much to kind of go over. It's been a quiet week in the horror world, but for me, that is. So there isn't really that much I can kind of say at this stage. I mean, I guess actually before we get into the news, I did chuck out to the Discord earlier today. I'm recording a pod today. If there's anything in particular people wanted me to talk about or wanted a question answered, and Eddie Hickey came up in the chat and said, interesting thing I want to go about is, are horror killers really evil? Like, is Jason a criminal because he really just got revenge on his bullies? Okay. Are horror killers really evil? Well, I mean, firstly, that's on a case-by-case basis. If we're talking slasher villains, predominantly when they start going on a massacre, then yes, I would say they are evil. Like, is Jason a criminal because he really just got revenge on his bullies? I mean, Jason is an interesting example because technically his mum got revenge on his bullies. And it wasn't necessarily bullies, it was the negligent camp counsellors that led to him drowning because he wasn't being watched because they were off banging. So his mum dealt with them, and then when the camp was reopened, his mum started killing the counsellors, and then Jason came to kill the counsellors and tried to get revenge on his mum, and then just went on killing counsellors and bikers and scientists in space, went to hell, transferred bodies with different people via eating his heart a bit earlier, and then had a feud with the Dream Demon. So there's been a few things there, but in regards to are horror killers really evil? Majority of the time, yes. There may be motives, and those motives may be understandable or not to an extent, but I think once you cross that line, and it's not really just an eye for an eye, it's an extreme means to an end. I think the only person that you could maybe say has a point, even though they do kind of cross that line, and you could argue, are they actually crossing that line because they're giving the people an opportunity, is Jigsaw, John Kramer. But even then, his ways of teaching people a lesson is very, very off the deep end. To be able to go to those lengths is evil, ultimately, regardless of whether you can, in some roundabout way, justify their actions, still evil. So, in regards to the comment about Jason, yeah, bullying's bad. Bullying shouldn't be tolerated. But going on a murderous rampage is probably worse, I would say. Feel free to agree or disagree. That's fine. Anyway, yeah, there's not much to chat about on today's show. It's going to be a quick one. Let's just get into the horror news, shall we? is the news. Oh, oh, oh.
This is God.
There we go. This is the news. This is the horror news, and this is all coming from bloodydisgusting.com. Check them out for your latest horror bits and bobs. It's all good over there. First up, this is from John Squires. The 4 new horror movies released at home this week, plus the Creep tapes on Shudder. So, Melissa Barrera of Scream 6 and Abigail fame is back in Vertical's new comedy horror movie Your Monster, and the coming-of-rage horror rom-com is now available on VOD. Coming of rage seems to be a term coined quite a bit recently. The romantic monster movie puts a new spin on the classic tale of Beauty and the Beast. In the film, after her life falls apart, soft-spoken actress Laura Franco finds her voice again when she meets a terrifying yet weirdly charming monster living in her closet. Your Monster tells the story of the soft-spoken actor Laura Franco, who is dumped by her long-time boyfriend while recovering from surgery and retreats to her childhood home to recover. With her future looking bleak, insult is added to injury when Laura discovers her ex is staging a musical she helped him develop. But out of these gut-wrenching life changes emerges a monster, with whom she finds a connection, encouraging Laura to follow her dreams, open her heart, and fall in love with her inner rage. Kayla Foster, Megan Faye, Brandon Victor Dixon, Ike Ufemedu, and Lana Young also star in the film from writer and director Caroline Lindy. Horror comedy movie is based on Caroline Lindy's short film from 2019. So I checked out the trailer for this. I can't say it appeals to me that much. So a little while ago I did try and watch is it Lady Frankenstein or Lisa Frankenstein? And I'd started it without much time available, so I didn't have enough time to watch the majority of the film. But what I did see was not really my sort of thing. When I saw, even before seeing the coming of rage mention, which was also used in the blurb for Lisa Frankenstein, when I watched the trailer for this, I thought, okay, it's kind of got that same teeny bop rom-com with a bit of a horror element in there, or a spooky setting more so than horror. Not really my sort of thing. Not really anything that grabs my interest personally. Next up, the feature directorial debut of Jersey Shore alum Jenny J. Wow Farley. New found footage horror movie Devon was released onto VOD outlets this past Tuesday. For those with a Screenbox subscription, mark your calendars for November 26th, 2024. In the film, when a group of friends try to uncover the truth behind an unsolved disappearance, they unwittingly find themselves at the centre of a terrifying mystery. Full synopsis. Following their daughter's mysterious disappearance, Devon's parents never stopped searching for the truth. After the asylum she disappeared from was condemned, their questions looked like they would remain forever unanswered. Years later, a cryptic website recruits 5 courageous individuals to explore the abandoned asylum and discover what happened to the girl. Unaware that they are embarking on a perilous one-way journey, these individuals delve into the sinister depths with only their equipment, leading to a terrifying and deadly experience. A long-time admirer of the genre, Jenny J. Wow Farley takes viewers into a found-footage mystery which draws from the real-life horrors of the unknown. Okay, so I checked out the trailer for this. I am familiar with Jenny J. Wow Farley, as I have seen back in the day the Jersey Shore. Forget about it. Apologies if that offended anyone. Yeah, I do like trashy MTV reality, quote unquote reality TV shows. I can't say that I've seen any of the newer Jersey Shores. Can't say the same about Geordie Shore though. Anyway, so the trailer for this looked like it could be kind of interesting. I mean, it looks like your kind of typical found footage, but I haven't watched a decent found footage recently or super recently. So, I mean, I kind of dug it. I kind of like the look of it. It just didn't necessarily look like it was doing anything new. But if you can get the scares right, YouTubers or whatever going around a haunted asylum, it works, you know. Grave Encounters did it great. Gonjan Haunted Asylum did it great. Grave Encounters 2, not so much. It was okay, it wasn't great. But this looks like there is potential there, so I'm optimistic about Devon. And next, a children's legend turns into a horrifying nightmare in Piper, a wickedly creepy horror fantasy that tells a terrifying tale of children paying for the sins of their parents. Starring Elizabeth Hurley, Piper is now available on VOD outlets. Emigre Liz, is that like an I don't know. I don't know that word. Moves to a quaint German town with her daughter Amy, but ends up in the Piper's crosshairs when it is revealed that she's hiding a dark secret from her past that puts Amy's life in jeopardy. Liz and Amy individually learn the truth behind the legend of the Piper, who is a cruel and vengeful minister of harsh justice, punishing adults who get away with crimes by taking away their children. No longer a legend of yesteryear, the Piper is real, with his judging eyes set on Liz and her dark secret. The girl's only hope for salvation comes when she falls for a young and mysterious street magician, Luca. Can he save her from the Piper's clutches? Written and directed by Anthony Waller, Piper is based on a story by Duncan Kennedy and was produced by Gleb Fetisov, Alexander Buckman, and Anthony Waller. Mia Jenkins, Jack Stewart, Tara Fitzgerald, Ryan Webber, and Robert Dawes also star. Okay, I did kind of like the look of this. I mean, first off, Elizabeth Hurley, does not appear to have aged. I haven't seen her in anything for definitely what feels like decades, and she looks exactly the same. So clearly, there's some witchcraft going on here. It's crazy. I do kind of like the look of this in terms of these films, this genre of taking classic children tales and doing a horror spin on them. That's not anything new, but it's certainly a current trend. And we'll talk about another one of those a little bit later on. I do think that this has some potential, along the same lines of how I think that Peter Pan horror film world, the Pooniverse horror Peter Pan thing, I think that actually looks like that could be kind of decent. This one, I mean, it looks like it's quite well produced. It looks like there's a bit of money behind it. The Piper looks notably quite creepy. Yeah, again, I'm kind of interested to see where it's going to land. If this appears on Prime or Netflix or something, I'll definitely check it out. And then next up, Entertainment Squad's genre label The Horror Collective released their new movie Do Not Open on VOD outlets this past Tuesday, described as a psychological thriller that exposes the terrifying consequences of our modern obsession with technology. The film, written and directed by Brian Baberick, offers viewers a stark reminder that the dangers we fear most might already be in our hands, on our phones, tablets, and computers. When daughter's longing to attend a music festival is thwarted by her parents, she downloads a mysterious app in a desperate attempt to avoid the wrath of her friends, unknowingly triggering a series of disturbing events. As the Doe family's tech addictions come under attack, their devices malfunction, leading to eerie disturbances in their daily routines. We spend so much time staring at our screens without asking what could be staring back, warns director Brian Baberick. In Do Not Open, we explore what happens when we take the blinders off and explore what is on the other side of all those tiny cameras and microphones, observing us every waking and sleeping moment. This one wasn't a great trailer. It certainly felt quite slapped together. Didn't really give me a lot to go on, and also didn't really kind of show anything that looked particularly interesting. Yeah, it didn't intrigue me enough to kind of remember this film. You know, in weeks to come, if this suddenly appears on a Prime list, I won't remember that I've looked at the trailer for this. This is the feeling that I have, which is kind of harsh, but it's true. And then finally, it's Tubby time all over again with the Creep Tapes, a brand new small screen expansion of the found footage horror franchise that just premiered on Shudder this weekend. Mark Duplass reprises his leading role in the 6-episode Shudder original series from Duplass and Patrick Bryce, with the first 2 episodes now streaming on Shudder and AMC+. The Creep Tapes continues to unravel the mind of a secluded serial killer who lures videographers into his world with the promise of a paid job documenting his life. Unfortunately, as the tape rolls, the killer's questionable intentions surface with his increasingly odd behaviour, and the victims will learn they may have made a deadly mistake. Mark Duplass previews a little over 10 years ago. Patrick Bryce and I spent a week together in my cabin with a small digital camera. We emerged with a found footage horror film that was so wildly strange and uncomfortable we assumed no one would see it. To be continuing this unholy legacy in the series format is a true nightmare come true. The franchise centers on Duplass's character, a total creep whose name is ever changing but whose bizarre, murderous behavior is always documented in a found footage style. The original found footage movie in 2014 was followed by a sequel in 2017. So the first two, well, the two Creep films are quite beloved in the horror community. And I don't know, I think I've mentioned before when talking about news on Creep and potential for Creep 3, and then obviously the Creep tapes has been mentioned in the news a little bit recently. But my interest is just sort of hampered by, there's something about Mark Duplass that I don't really click with. He was on a show that I used to watch called The League, a comedy show about fantasy football league, and I always found him kind of irritating in it. I don't know why, I don't know what it is. Something about him that I just find kind of irritating, to be honest. And I've seen both Creep films. They're okay. I don't know if it's him or what it is, but they didn't creep me out. I felt, their comedic moments kind of overlaid any kind of sense of real dread or horror. I think Creep 2 had some moments in the last 30 minutes that were okay, but really outside of that, I don't know. I mean, I will watch the Creep tapes at some point, but I know that the first 2 episodes at least have dropped, but it's not a series that is kind of connected with me in the same way that has a lot of horror fans. Just the way it is. So next in the horror news, Mouse of Horrors. Trailer unleashes the next bootleg Mickey Mouse slasher villain. Right up from John Squires. Originally announced under the title The Mouse Experiment, ITN Studios has announced today that their upcoming Mickey-inspired horror movie is now titled Mouse of Horrors. The official trailer is now online. In the upcoming Mickey Mouse horror movie, the film follows a group of friends stuck at a fairground amusement park, hunted by a mutated rat, Steamboat Willie. Brendan Petrizzo directed the indie slasher, Mouse of Horrors, I can't talk tonight, which stars Natasha Tassini, Louis Santa, Nicola Farrell, Michelle Bauer, Ali Marino, and Tessa Wood. For the sake of clarity, this film is not part of the growing Pooniverse. Classic short film that introduced Mickey Mouse to the world, 1928's Steamboat Willie, has officially entered the public domain, which means filmmakers don't need the permission of Disney to use that original incarnation of Mickey in their movies, and a whole bunch of them are taking advantage with a slew of twisted Mickey projects already in the works, I should say. The first of these features was The Mousetrap, released earlier this year, with Scream Boat headed our way next year, and then there's Mouseboat Massacre coming soon. Trailer for this looks kind of shit. I mean, it's a mutated mouse, but it's not. I mean, you look at classic low budget, even 80s, early 90s horror films where where CGI wasn't used. It was just practical effects and, plasticky foam costumes. But at least they went kind of all in on the costumes. In this, it's clearly a man wearing a mask. He's doing all the cheesy hallmarks of the head tilted to the side to look, he's a bit creepy, he's a bit unhinged. The guy's got tattoos and is wearing gloves. All it is literally this crappy mouse mask that looks a little bit deranged with black makeup around the eyes. That's it. It's not a mutated mouse, it's a man in a mask. And it's things like that where it's just like, you can't even underline that. Even when it's a cheap cash grab, at least put some effort in. The fairground location looks pretty cool, but this just looks so dirt cheap. It just looks like crap. It's a shame. Well, it's not a shame. I mean, who cares? It's just exploiting IPs that are available that are outside the public domain. It's cheap. Anyway, I don't want to talk about that anymore. Let's move on. Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, returns to VHS with a new release from Dark Sky. Write-ups from John Squires. One of the most disturbing horror movies ever made, Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer is the latest classic horror movie to get a retro-style VHS release here in the modern era. From Dark Sky Selects, the 1986 horror movie is now available on VHS for $29.98. Acclaimed by critics as a masterpiece of modern horror, director John McNaughton's Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, is presented here totally uncut and uncensored. The film is based on the horrific true-life crimes of Henry Lee Lucas. Widely heralded as one of the greatest serial killer movies of all time, Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer presents a bleak and unflinching dive into the mind of a mass murderer. Recently released from prison, the nomadic Henry finds temporary abode in the rundown Chicago lodgings of a former jail acquaintance and small-time drug dealer, Otis. Hiding behind his unremarkable employment as a pest exterminator, Henry leads a double life, prowling the streets by night on a brutal and apparently motiveless killing spree. As the bodies mount up, Otis finds himself inducted into Henry's dark secret world, but when Otis's sister Becky moves in, herself fleeing from an uncomfortable domestic situation, it quickly becomes apparent that two's company, but three's a crowd. I did see this once back in the day. Now, I do feel at some point I need to give it a rewatch because it is incredibly bleak and it is incredibly grounded. Like, it almost feels like it's a documentary at points. It is quite nasty, and I think the reason that I just never followed up watching it again is because when I saw this, it was around the time of me being a huge Halloween fan, getting into Nightmare on Elm Street, getting into Friday the 13th, other franchises, discovering more of John Carpenter's work, and this just, as I mentioned, it just has this such a grounded feel to it. Like it's just an uncomfortable watch. And I probably do need to give it a rewatch because there isn't too much I remember about it other than some particular scenes just being like, just getting under your skin. I don't have a VHS player, so I won't be picking that up. But I am sure, if I check on Amazon Prime Video, that it is Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. I'm sure it's on Shudder. No. Oh, there's a sequel, Henry 2, Portrait of a Serial Killer. Didn't know there was a sequel. Didn't know there was a need for it. Oh, it's available on the Arrow player, which I don't have anymore. Typical. There we go. Let's move on with the news. So, Yellow Jackets Season 3 will premiere on Valentine's Day 2025. From John Squires. Paramount Plus with Showtime has announced this morning that the hotly anticipated Yellow Jackets Season 3 is headed our way in early 2025. The season will debut with 2 episodes on Friday, February 14th on streaming and on demand for Paramount Plus subscribers, with a Paramount Plus with Showtime plan before its on-air debut on Sunday, February 16th. There's an announcement teaser online. The two-time Academy Award-winning actress Hilary Swank will guest star and join the all-star cast along with Joel McHale. Created by Ashley Lyle and Bart Nicholson, Yellow Jackets is the saga of a team of wildly talented high school girls soccer players who become the unlucky survivors of a plane crash deep in the remote northern wilderness. The series chronicles their descent from a complicated but thriving team to savage clans, while also tracking the lives they've attempted to piece back together nearly 25 years later, proving that the past is never really past and what began out in the wilderness is far from over. Equal parts survival epic, psychological horror story, and coming-of-age drama, the 10-episode third season will pick up in the aftermath of the dramatic Season 2 finale. I really enjoyed Season 1, and I never really got around to properly watching Season 2, not for any reason, not like I felt there was any sort of drop-off, but my kind of routine had changed when Series 2 came about. And it's one of those shows that I keep meaning to jump back into, but whenever I have opportunity or I'm on Paramount Plus, I just never think to watch it. It's one of those things, and I'm sure you may have had it before, where there's particular shows that you just drop off of, not because they've become repetitive or boring or this, that, or the other, but they've just kind of fallen out to the wayside, and there's maybe been an intention there to follow up and continue, but it just, for whatever reason, time, being in the mood, availability, and all that, it just hasn't really occurred. That's kind of it for Yellow Jackets. I feel that with a date set for Series 3, I've got plenty of time to get Series 2 nailed. But I also feel I probably need to watch like a YouTube refresher on Series 1 and then restart Series 2, because I think I did 2 episodes maybe of Series 2. And then finally, some book news. Ooh. Stephen King's next horror novel, Never Flinch, is releasing in May 2025. John Squire's write-up. Stephen King's next novel has been announced and detailed by Entertainment Weekly this afternoon. The outlet reports that King's Never Flinch will be released on May 27th, 2025. EW details Never Flinch features intertwining storylines, one about a killer on a diabolical revenge mission, and another about a vigilante stalking a feminist celebrity speaker. Of particular note, frequent King character Holly Gibney will return in the new novel. Here's the official plot synopsis. When the Buckeye City Police Department receives a disturbing letter from a person threatening to kill 13 innocents and one guilty in an act of atonement for the needless death of an innocent man, Detective Izzy Janes has no idea what to think. Are 14 citizens about to be slaughtered in an unhinged act of retribution? As the investigation unfolds, Izzy realizes that the letter writer is deadly serious, and she turns to her friend Holly Gibney for help. Meanwhile, controversial and outspoken women's rights activist Kate McKay is embarking on a multi-state lecture tour, drawing packed venues of both fans and detractors. Someone who vehemently opposes Kate's message of female empowerment is targeting her and disrupting her events. At first, no one is hurt, but the stalker is growing bolder, and Holly is hired to be Kate's bodyguard, a challenging task with a headstrong employer and a determined adversary driven by wrath and his belief in his own righteousness. So, I'm a big King fan. That's no surprise. And I guess, actually, a bit about my week that I had failed to mention is I am finally progressing along the beam to the Dark Tower. So, Dark Tower books, and this is me sort of going off on a bit of a side tangent, but the Dark Tower books are his magnum opus, and it's a series that I've always wanted to kind of get into and tried at various points, but it's never really clicked. Years and years ago, I read The Gunslinger, Drawing of the Three, and The Wastelands, and had mixed feelings on them. I found the tales themselves interesting enough, but ultimately what was irritating me was the lack of progress on the path, because it felt like, you know, the Gunslinger initially didn't really feel like much happened. Drawing of the Three felt like the majority of it was Roland dying on a beach with half his hand missing. And then The Wasteland, I think I kind of preferred, because it felt like there was a good progression. But again, it seemed quite slow going. Anyway, I then started Wizard and Glass, and I stopped because I really was finding it so dull and boring. I've made no mistake, or I made no surprise, I should say. I get my words mixed up. That I'm not a huge fan of prequels. I kind of like to kind of follow the modern day story. I do obviously understand that there is good use of them and getting some character development and some backstory. But normally, if a storyline is following a path with an end goal in sight, I just like to continue that path. I don't like to be sidetracked from that. And so I'd stopped for a long time. And anyway, I ended up reading a lot online and watching YouTube videos about the Dark Tower, understood the general gist of what occurs, and kind of figured I need to give this another go. So I got a box set of books 1 to 7 plus the Wind Through the Keyhole that came out a bit later on, book 4.5, I guess you could call it, and reread The Gunslinger. And understanding a bit more about the world going into that, I enjoyed it a lot more. Drawing of the Three, again, enjoyed it a lot more. I really dug it more this second approach around. I didn't reread The Wasteland because I thought, you know what, I enjoyed that the first time. I remember a fair amount of that. I'll leave that just because I want to kind of keep progressing. So I went back into Wizard and Glass, and I struggled so much for months. I'd read anything else other than that, and to the point where I'd had the Audible credit for it, along with having a copy of it on Kindle. So technically, I own Wizard and Glass in 3 different formats: Kindle, paperback, and Audible. And what a cool feature I'd noticed was that if you own it in Kindle and Audible, it updates your progress to the latest position where you are in either of them. So I was able to jump into the Audible. It remembered where I was from reading it on Kindle. Great. I then started listening to it at 1.5 speed because, again, I'd heard everyone saying, "Oh, it's the best book. It's the best book, best one in the series." Even my friend Tom was saying, "Oh, it's really good." He understands why some people don't like it, but generally, it's really, really good. And I did see on Reddit some tier lists people gave of ranking lists of the Dark Tower series, and some people just saying, "I don't get why people love Wizard and Glass. I struggled so much that it is so dull." And that kind of reaffirmed my feelings a bit. It kind of made me think, okay, it isn't just me that doesn't like it. Anyway, I've had to do a fair bit of driving recently. Driving down south for a day in the office, driving down south to see my family and friends. So I've had plenty of time to listen at 1.5 speed, that is, to Wizard and Glass. And out of its 24-hour runtime, somewhere around hour 17 or 18, I got hooked. I don't know if it's because it jumped back to the present day for a moment, a bit of an interlude, to remind me that, oh, there are these characters, Eddie, Susanna, Jake, and Oi, and adult Roland. But the story it started finally getting interesting. This, Romeo and Juliet romance, then you started getting the reactions of the characters around them and, seeing what's going on, getting worried about that. It got good. And it went for me from being a book that I couldn't even think of a score for because I didn't know if I'd ever finish it, really, really disliking it, to really being solid. I really, really enjoyed it, even to the point of kind of going, I'd like to just put my headphones in and listen to my Audible. I just wanted to continue and finish up the story. I thoroughly enjoyed it, so I have now started reading the Wolves of the Calla. I've got another book on Kindle, Red Peak, something like about a cult that I'm blitzing through, so I can then fully give my attention to Wolves of the Calla. But I am progressing towards the Dark Tower. Finally, it's taken long enough, but I am. Back to this, Never Flinch. So I do enjoy Modern King. I find that his newer novels have a lot more pace to them. He doesn't spend quite so much time on the world building, and some areas I miss that, and other areas, other novels and sections of books, I kind of think, I like that it's quite pacey. It moves with aplomb. Another Holly book. I mean, I do enjoy Holly Gibney, but I kind of feel that after the book Holly, we should kind of give her a rest. I would like King to return to more metaphysical horror and nightmarish horror. He hasn't really sort of done that much of that recently that I can think of. I mean, his short story works are great. I've really enjoyed pretty much all of the short stories, and You Like It Darker. But I would like another novel to go down that straight horror route. He dabbled with the otherworldness in Fairy Tale, and Fairy Tale was fine. It wasn't amazing, it was fine. But I mean, part of me wants him to just do a return to Derry and, have one of the eggs of Pennywise survived. I don't think he ever will, but he's done sequels that you never thought would occur. Doctor Sleep. Sequel to Cujo to an extent in Some Like It Darker, or You Like It Darker. So who knows? But I would prefer that. I mean, I will read it. I read all of his books when they come out. Huge fan, but I kind of feel a bit of Holly Gibney fatigue, to be honest. I feel, let's do some straight out and out horror again, please, Steve. I know he's getting on a bit. Anyway, that is it for the horror news. That was the news. Oh, 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 oh. Oh, hit the button again. It's review time, people, and we're going to start off with our retro review, Creepshow 2. So I kind of wanted to do a retro review for a little while. I just hadn't managed to fit it into my my schedule, but I've made the time for it today. So Creepshow 2 is a 1987 American comedy horror anthology film directed by Michael Gornick and the sequel to Creepshow. Gornick was previously the cinematographer of the first film, and the screenplay was written by Jorge Romero, who was director of the original film. The film stars were Louis Childs, George Kennedy, Dorothy Lamour, and Tom Savini. It was once again based upon stories by Stephen King. So, as per usual, we're going to talk a little bit about the film, talk about the highs, the lows, and I'm going to give it a score out of 10. So this has a prologue with a number of interludes and 3 tales in it. The prologues and interludes are all a mixture of, kind of similar to the first film, it's a mixture of comic book panel animation and real life instances. And it follows a young lad called Billy who's eager to pick up a latest copy of Creepshow from The Creep, played by Tom Savini, who is pretty cool in this. He only has a couple little moments, but I really quite liked the look of this. It's basically like a goblin man. I like that, and I really kind of dug the return to the animation style that they had in the first film. So our 3 tales are Old Chief Woodenhead, The Raft, and The Hitchhiker. The Raft is probably the most famous. It's an adaptation of The Raft from Skeleton Crew. I believe The Raft is in Skeleton Crew. Let me just have a little check. Doesn't say. It's either Graveyard Shift or Skeleton Crew. I'm not sure about Old Chief Woodenhead and The Hitchhiker, if they are from other books or short stories. So yeah, okay. So Old Chief Woodenhead involves a small town called Dead River, which is basically just a dirt town, nothing going on there. There's an old elderly couple who run a general store, who have this massive cigar store Indian named Old Chief Woodenhead, this wooden statue out front. They are given some jewelry, some sacred treasures by a local of a native tribe, but later on, the nephew of that tribe, armed with a shotgun, and 2 of his friends come and end up killing the old couple. But Old Chief Woodenhead somehow comes to life and goes on a slaughtering spree. It's pretty good. A character gets scalped in a pretty gnarly way. And there's not really much more to say on that. The Raft is fairly infamous for a mixture of reasons. So these college students end up going swimming and ending up on this raft out by on this lake. Whilst out there, they then see this massive blob thing in the water. It kind of looks like an oil slick, but it's a mixture between an oil slick and the blob from the Blob. And it does basically work like that. It's the blob in water. What happens is when it touches you, it starts dissolving your body, and it then kind of sticks to you and pulls you into it. And one by one, these teens are pulled in. I think the most one of the best deaths in it is one of the jocks. It comes through underneath the raft because his foot is going between the slats of wood, and it kind of hooks onto his leg, pulls him down, but in doing so breaks his leg upwards. So as he's going down, his foot and his heel are facing him. Pretty insane visual. He gets pulled in. Now, part of why this is a little bit infamous is it is a little bit creepy, a little bit R word. I'm very careful with what I say on YouTube, where Randy is laying next to Laverne and starts kissing her and touching her up while she's asleep. It's not really clear if they're in a relationship or not. I don't think they are. But he starts kind of getting fresh with her while she's asleep, which is a little creepy, to say the least. But her face is facing one side of the raft, and she then starts screaming, and as she moves her face up, the blob thing the creature's been seeping through and covered over half of her face, and it's then pulling her down and pulls her into the water and starts munching away on her. While this is occurring, Randy's basically sacrificed her, even though it's him trying to be horrified by what's occurring. He jumps into the water and swims as fast as he can, and yeah, it doesn't go well. And then finally, the hitchhiker. This is one of the ones. I mean, I mainly only remember the raft from this film, but I'd completely forgotten about the hitchhiker and old Chief Woodenhead. The hitchhiker is a businesswoman who accidentally has a hit and run, and everywhere she goes, she then is getting approached and attacked by this hitchhiker, who is becoming even more bloodied up because she keeps basically running over him and excuse me, and plowing into him into a tree, and he's becoming more and more and more torn apart as this is occurring. There isn't that much to it. That's kind of it, and that's probably why I can't remember that. And then the epilogue. Excuse me. The epilogue has Billy, who's being pursued by bullies, leading them to a group of giant Venus flytraps that eat the thugs, and that's a pretty cool little cartoon moment. I mean, that's just me basically saying what happens in the film. It is an old film. It came out in '87. It's not as good as the first film, but then again, with the first film, I think it's fun, but I'm not like a massive fan of Creepshow. I never find myself wanting to go back and watch the original Creepshow that often. It's like any anthology. There's some good, there's some not so good, some great, and some not very memorable at all. Kind of similar to Creepshow, the TV show. There's standout moments, and then there's completely forgettable episodes. As far as this goes, it is fun. I mean, there's some questionable moments in it, but it's got some pretty good gore. I'm going to give it 6.5 out of 10 for Creepshow 2. And then finally, Wake. Wake is what I watched on Shudder this week. 2024, doesn't have its own Wikipedia page. Typical. Directed by Tom Arizmendi and Austin Parks Stewart. Written by Elizabeth H. Vu, starring Fievel Stewart, Susan Reno, and Sarah Camus. Desperate for a lead role in a Hollywood remake, a struggling actress tracks down the lead of the original film, who's now a mysterious recluse. Strange occurrences quickly turn the meeting into a nightmare. Okay, so Fievel Stewart is playing Lake Reed, who is a struggling actress. She can't really get any work. She tends to faint when she's struggling under pressure, and she has a scar on her hand from a quite traumatic incident in her upbringing. And so this film is jumping between the moments of her as a youth that formed how she is today and what she is currently going through. So she has located this famed actress, Corinne Abel, I believe, who starred in the original film, Wake. It's not a real film. And won many, many awards, but has since sort of become a recluse and just shun the spotlight. And so Fievel Stewart's character really, really wants to get this role, even though she's not really up for it, in terms of being considered. And her agent is even thinking of walking away from her for some telephone calls. She is determined to get this role. And even so, to the extent that she basically breaks into the house to try and talk to Corinne. I think the score in this works brilliantly. I really dug some of the appearances, some of the cinematography, the mise en scene. Lots of tight close-ups on the face during dialogue moments. And in terms of action, it is actually quite a grounded film, quite slow in some areas. It does have some really neat artistic shots, but ultimately they don't necessarily kind of go anywhere. They don't really necessarily hint at something greater. You get to the end of the film and you sort of think, okay, those short arty shots that occurred a couple of times here and there. Like there's this massive white room with a white person knelt down. Don't know if I just missed it. Maybe it's just me not paying attention fully. But you kind of think, I mean, that was a nice shot, but what was that representing? Not sure. Not sure. I think it may have been style over substance, maybe. But this is a film where there's a creepy underlying tale, and it becomes fairly obvious where the story is going to go. In terms of during her discussions with Corin, she does some investigation around the house. She finds an old digital recorder from someone else who wanted to interview her a few years ago that disappeared. So you then start to get an idea of, okay, things aren't quite what they seem here. And you notice there are certain ticks that Corin has, and it becomes, again, quite obvious where they're going to go. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it's one when you get to the finale, you know, it's not too surprising. It is kind of maybe going for that shock value of what's actually transpired. But Lake does find herself in a situation where it's basically starting to become apparent a bit too late that something outside of our realms of reality is occurring. There's definitely something odd going on with Corin and her helper Tabitha. Performances are pretty decent in this. I think Fievel Stewart's pretty good as Lake, the lead. Corin is decent. There's a couple of monologue moments a bit later on in the film where was going for a bit of power that wasn't necessarily quite there. Generally, there's nothing kind of terrible about this film. It has a pretty terrible review on IMDb, pretty weighted score that's very low, but I certainly didn't think it was bad. I just kind of felt like you could have done a little bit more here to build this up, and even the going into her past, it sort of makes sense as to why that is, why we're getting those flashbacks, why they are kind of become part of the present. But it also feels like maybe it was a bit of padding for time. I thought this was fine. Fine, 5 out of 10. It's fine. It's middle of the road. It's certainly not 3.2 out of 10 on IMDb. I think it's a bit better than that. I think the score is definitely a real highlight for building tension. I think it's just ultimately the script had some decent ideas, but probably could have fleshed them out a little bit better. So we've breezed through it, Ghouls and Fiends. That is it for this week's Ministry of Horror. We'll be back in a week's time or so's time. I'm not going to commit to next week. It's going to be a bit busy. But when we are back, we'll be back on podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on YouTube, Ministry of Horror. Make sure to subscribe, make sure to like the videos, share the videos around, and get the word out on the show. We are on X, Ministry_Horror. We're on TikTok, Ministry of Horror. Check us out over on there. Instagram is Tez Elliott, TEZZELLIOTT. Also, if you're in the UK and you need a bookkeeper, check out TS Elliott Bookkeeping. We do bookkeeping services and VAT calculation, payroll management, and financial statements for sole traders and partnerships. A shameless self-plug, I know, but hey, if you're not going to do your own promotion, who is? So check them out. Anyway, thank you very much, Ghouls and Fiends. I will catch you next time. Goodbye.